Well, one small EU nation is hailing its decision to not suspend the AstraZeneca vaccine. We'll be speaking with the Health Minister and Deputy Prime Minister of Malta about his country's response to the coronavirus pandemic. We'll have that interview with Dr. Christopher Fern coming up in the next hour, so stay with us for that. Well, meanwhile, AstraZeneca is getting a huge boost from the United States following concerns across Europe over its safety. A US clinical trial has found that AstraZeneca is effective 79% of the time in mild symptomatic cases of the disease with no serious side effects. Well, last week, EU regulators confirmed the vaccine was safe and effective after reports that it may cause possible blood clots. Well, AstraZeneca says it plans on applying for emergency use authorization in the US next month. To discuss all of this, I want to welcome Professor Adrian Hill. He's the director of the Jenner Institute at Oxford University, where AstraZeneca's vaccine was developed. Great to have you with us, Professor.
Good morning.
So the results of this latest trial here in the US is fantastic news. This is the biggest trial to date of the AstraZeneca vaccine, finding that it's 79% effective in mild symptomatic cases, 100% in severe cases with no safety concerns. Surely this is what's needed to boost confidence in the AstraZeneca vaccine.
Absolutely, and we're very pleased to see that 100% figure has come up again as the endpoint that is really the most important for public health. We saw that in the large 3-country trial in the UK, in Brazil, and South Africa, so that's confirmatory, if you like. And this time, the efficacy against mild disease is higher, and that's probably due to minor differences in the protocol, how severe the cases were. But we were particularly pleased to see that in older adults, the efficacy came out around about 80%. And you may remember there was some concern that the numbers in the previous trials had been fairly small in the elderly. So all around, really very encouraging. And, this is not even the best immunization regimen. This is 1 month between doses. If you go for 3 months between doses, you not only get higher efficacy in previous trials, but you find that it's actually easier to deploy because you don't need as many doses up front in the first month to vaccinate the same number of people.
That is great news. And I did want to ask you more about the fact that this trial involved 6,000 patients over the age of 65. And as you said, it found that this vaccine was 80% effective for that age group, which is pretty significant given that some countries had recommended against giving this vaccine to the elderly, right?
Yeah, but that, seems a long time ago now, even though it was only a month or two. That was because the numbers in the initial trials were limited. But then, within almost days, data came out from Scotland on 80-year-olds and even 90-year-olds, where with a single dose, we were seeing efficacy of the order of 85%. So that led to a lot of those countries rowing back on that and starting to vaccinate older adults. And that's really important, of course, because older adults are those who have the greatest disease burden from this pandemic.
Professor, what was your initial reaction when the EU moved to suspend use of this vaccine? And what do you feel will be the real impact, even though most countries have now given it the go-ahead?
Yeah, well, these pauses in clinical trials and in deployment occur frequently. They don't normally get as much attention as they have this time. The pause was dealt with very quickly by the European Medicines Agency last week in 2 or 3 days, and they were absolutely clear that the benefits of this vaccine hugely outweigh any measurable risk. So I thought they did rather well, actually. These very short delays aren't a huge issue. If you delay for weeks and weeks, then obviously that's more problematic.
There are still some Scandinavian countries that want to investigate this further. What's your take on that? What would you say to them?
Yeah, so the concern here was thrombosis. And again, in the data presented this morning from the US trial, it's absolutely clear there was no increase in thrombosis in the vaccinees. Across the large data sets in the UK and continental Europe, there's no overall increase in thrombosis. Everybody's agreed on that. But there seems to be this incredibly rare syndrome that is a particular type of cerebral vein thrombosis that's seen in very, very, very rare cases, maybe 1 in a million. The numbers aren't exactly clear in population prevalence. And that may be an issue, and people are looking at that in detail. But again, the European Medicines Agency looked at that very carefully and said it was safe to continue. So we're very reassured, not just by the efficacy we're seeing today, but by the safety profile as well.
And Professor, just finally, the AstraZeneca vaccine still needs to go through the process of being approved from the US Federal Drug Administration to be used here. And by the time that happens, it may not be needed here. There might be enough vaccines from the others already in use. But this is a global fight. What should happen to those doses?
Well, firstly, in the US, that might be the case, but I'm afraid that's a pretty optimistic interpretation that, by summer it'll all be over. I think there's going to be another wave later in the year. These doses will definitely be needed in the US. And AstraZeneca tell us today that they have 30 million doses ready to go now, 50 million in the first month, and then a regular supply afterwards. So it's more vaccine is always good in this pandemic. Globally, the picture is very different. 101, I think, is the number of countries that are now deploying or approving this vaccine. So it really is being used in most of the countries in the world, and it'll be great to have the US added to that list.
Absolutely. Professor Adrian Hill, fantastic to get you on the show. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.